Okay, let's start using our very powerful data analysis tool on the web called StatCrunch. So we're going to take a look at loading a shared data set and then doing some data analysis. So I've got our StatCrunch screen over here in the right of the video. So you're finding this at statcrunch.com. Up in the right hand corner is where you would sign in or register for the first time. I'm already signed in, so you can see that there. And we're going to follow the directions here on the mod guide. So after logging into StatCrunch from the home screen, which is where I am now, click on Datasets in the box titled Data. So here's the data box, and we're going to click on Datasets. And you can see some of the most popularly used data sets show up here, but we're going to go ahead and search. So the title of our data set is Cereal Brands. Usually you can just put in a few words of your title and hit return to search, and then take a look down what we got. And I need the second one that's here, Cereal Brands, and then I'll always give you the owner as well. For your first exam, really all your exams, it's going to be crucial that you understand how to use StatCrunch. On this first exam, although the exam is in Canvas, the instructions, the questions are in Canvas, you'll put your answers in Canvas, you will load your data sets, and you do your data analysis in StatCrunch. So you've got to be very familiar with how this works. So I'll always give you the title of the data set, and I'll also always give you the owner to make sure that you're getting the right data set. So we'll click on the name of our data set, and it loads into our StatCrunch spreadsheet. So you'll see this is actually very similar to the data set that you were given in OLI. If we scroll down, we see that there are 77 rows in this data set. It's called a stacked data set. Each row is characteristics from one individual. So we've got shelf, manufacturer, and type are some three qualitative characteristics of our cereal. Remember that the name just identifies the individual, so it's not considered a variable. And then we've got our numeric or our quantitative variables off to the right. Okay, so let's see. Our guide is asking us to make a dot plot of the protein and fiber columns. So since a dot plot is a type of graph, we'll go to Graph, open that drop-down menu, pick dot plot. And every time we're using a function here in StatCrunch, we get a pop-up screen very similar to this one. The columns that you've got available are always in the top left. Any column you're going to use, you need to pop over to the right. So the first one we want is protein, and then you've got two ways to pick multiple columns. They're both described on your guide sheet there. If I wanted this entire block of columns down to fiber, I would hold the shift and click. That gives me the whole block. I don't want that though, so I'm going to click the first, and then control click if you are on a PC, or hold command and then click if you're on a Mac to select just those two individual columns. A lot of the things here we're not going to worry about for right now. There may be other times where we use those functions. If you're doing a lab, very often I will specify properties that your graph must have. You would fill those in here. We're just going to click compute for right now, and that's it. So here are our two dot plots. Thinking about some of the characteristics that we talked about here with this dot plot for lifespan, We talked about, well, this was invalid, but we were talking about the entire range of that lifespan. We talked about typical data. We talked about unusual data. So I'd like you to go ahead, pause the video here, and see if you could write down a few of those characteristics and how they apply to this fiber and protein data. Pause your video, then come back and we'll compare answers. All right, here are the characteristics that I noted. So I've got the total range for each. Fiber amounts range from 0 to 14 grams. Protein amounts range from 1 to 6 grams. Then I'm talking about that typical amount, which for right now is, really vague, some kind of a central value. So for fiber, I thought it was about in the 2 to 3 range, and honestly, very similar for protein. Even though the ranges for those two are so different, I think because the fiber is so heavily grouped on the left, you end up with typical values in about that same range from 2 to 3. And then unusual amounts, well, they're also kind of similar. I said that for the fiber, it was unusual to have more than 6. For protein, I thought it was unusual to have more than 5. But, as we relate that back to the range, we can see that the unusual amount is really kind of right at the upper end of that range, whereas the unusual amounts for fiber, if it's going to start at more than 6, it really goes up a lot higher to the end of that range at 14. Okay, in our next video, we're going to look at some specific characteristics of our distribution that will want to come into play. See you there.